I am Mohammed Huzaifa Ali, and in this video I will explain a brief history of the Renaissance in Europe. Let's go!
A brief history of the Renaissance in Europe. The Renaissance began in the early 14th century in Italy and spread throughout Europe. It was a time of great creativity and achievement in the arts and sciences. The Renaissance thinkers challenged the traditional ideas of the Church and developed new ways of thinking about the world. They believed that man could reason his way to truth and that nature could be understood through scientific observation. This new way of thinking led to advances in art, literature, music, and science. The Renaissance was a time of great advances in human knowledge and achievement. 1. The Renaissance was a period of time in Europe from the 14th to the 17th centuries where there was an explosion of creativity and learning. 2. The Renaissance began in Italy and spread to the rest of Europe. 3. The Renaissance was a time of renewed interest in ancient Greek and Roman culture. 4. The Renaissance was also a time of religious upheaval, with the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. 5. The Renaissance was a time of great changes in art, literature, music, science, and philosophy. 6. The Renaissance was a time of great political upheaval, with the rise of nation-states and the fall of the feudal system. 7. The Renaissance was a time of great social change, with the rise of the middle class and the development of capitalism. 1. The Renaissance was a period of time in Europe from the 14th to the 17th centuries where there was an explosion of creativity and learning. The Renaissance was an amazing period of time in European history. It was a time of great creativity and learning. The Renaissance began in the 14th century and ended in the 17th century. During this time, Europe experienced an explosion of knowledge and culture. Some of the most important changes during the Renaissance were the invention of the printing press and the rise of the middle class. The printing press allowed for the spread of ideas and knowledge. The middle class had more money and leisure time than ever before, which allowed them to patronize the arts. During the Renaissance, artists began to use perspective in their paintings. This made their paintings look more realistic. They also began to use light and shadow to create a more three-dimensional effect. Artists also started painting scenes from everyday life. Renaissance architects designed buildings that were both functional and beautiful. They used classical elements such as columns and arches. They also incorporated new ideas such as the use of light and symmetry. Renaissance scientists made important discoveries in a wide variety of fields. In astronomy, they discovered that the Earth revolves around the Sun. In anatomy, they learned about the human body and how it works. In physics, they discovered the laws of motion. The Renaissance was a truly remarkable period in history. It was a time of great change and progress. The Renaissance ushered in a new era of European history. 2. The Renaissance began in Italy and spread to the rest of Europe. The Renaissance was a period of time where there was a revival of art, literature, and culture. This time period is often referred to as the Golden Age. The Renaissance began in Italy around the 14th century and spread throughout the rest of Europe. Italy was the ideal place for the Renaissance to start because it was a crossroads for trade and culture. Florence was the center of the Renaissance movement. There were many famous artists and thinkers during the Renaissance such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. The Renaissance was a time of great change and progress. It was a time when people began to think more critically about the world around them. 3. The Renaissance was a time of renewed interest in ancient Greek and Roman culture. The Renaissance was a time of renewed interest in ancient Greek and Roman culture. This was due in part to the rediscovery of classical texts that had been lost to the West during the Middle Ages. These texts were studied and translated by scholars, who also began to look to the classical world for inspiration in their own work. During the Renaissance, Greek and Roman art was admired and imitated. Artists began to use more realistic techniques, and their work began to reflect the values of the Renaissance. This includes a focus on the individual, a respect for the natural world, and a celebration of the human body. Architecture also began to reflect classical influences during the Renaissance. Buildings were designed to show off the wealth and power of their owners, and often incorporated classical elements such as columns and porticos. 4. The Renaissance was also a time of religious upheaval, with the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. The Renaissance was also a time of religious upheaval. The Reformation was a 16th-century religious and political movement that arose in response to the growing reform movement within the Catholic Church. Protestantism, as the Reformation came to be known, was based on the belief that the Bible is the only source of religious authority and that the Pope is not the head of the Church. The Counter-Reformation was the Catholic Church's response to the Reformation. 5. The Renaissance was a time of great changes in art, literature, music, science, and philosophy. The Renaissance was a period of great change in Europe. It was a time of new ways of thinking, and of new ways of looking at the world. The Renaissance began in Italy, and then spread to the rest of Europe. The Renaissance was a time of great advances in art, literature, music, science, and philosophy. The Renaissance was an important time in the history of Europe. It was a time when new ideas were being developed, and when new ways of looking at the world were being created. The Renaissance was a time of great changes in art, literature, music, science, and philosophy. 6. The Renaissance was a time of great political upheaval, with the rise of nation-states and the fall of the feudal system. The Renaissance was a time of great political upheaval, with the rise of nation-states and the fall of the feudal system. This was a period of great change for Europe, and it had a profound impact on the course of history. The feudal system had been in place for centuries, and it was the dominant political structure of the time. Under feudalism, the nobility held power and the peasants were required to provide them with food and other resources. This system was based on the idea of hierarchy and order, and it had worked well for centuries. However, the Renaissance saw the rise of new ideas and new ways of thinking. This led to a challenge to the traditional feudal system, and the rise of nation-states. The nation-state was a new concept at the time, and it was based on the idea of a unified country with a single government. This was in contrast to the feudal system. The Renaissance also saw the rise of new economic powers, such as the merchant class. This new class was interested in trade and commerce, and they began to challenge the feudal system. The feudal system was based on the land, and the nobles held power because they owned the land. However, the merchant class was not interested in the land, and they began to amass great wealth. The Renaissance was a time of great political upheaval, and it had a profound impact on European history. The feudal system was challenged, and the nation-state rose to prominence. This period also saw the rise of new economic powers, and the beginning of a new era in history. 7. The Renaissance was a time of great social change, with the rise of the middle class and the development of capitalism. The Renaissance was a period of great social change, with the rise of the middle class and the development of capitalism. Prior to the Renaissance, Europe was largely divided into three classes: the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry. The Renaissance saw the rise of a new middle class, made up of merchants, artisans, and professionals. This new class was more educated and prosperous than the peasantry, and began to challenge the nobility for political power. The middle class also began to develop a new economic system, known as capitalism. This system was based on private ownership of businesses and the selling of goods and services for profit. Previously, the economic system had been based on agriculture and the exchange of goods and services among the different classes. The Renaissance was a time of great social change, and the rise of the middle class and the development of capitalism were two of the most significant changes that took place. These changes had a profound impact on European society and culture, and laid the foundation for the modern world. The Renaissance was one of the most important periods in European history. It was a time of great social, political, and cultural change. The Renaissance began in Italy in the 14th century, and spread to the rest of Europe in the 16th century. The Renaissance was a time of great advances in art, literature, and science. It was also a time of religious and political turmoil. The Renaissance came to an end in the early 17th century, but its legacy continues to this day.
Thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's as easy as a click. Don't miss a beat. Hit that thumbs up to show your support. It means a lot. We can't compete. Share our content with friends far and wide. Spread the joy. Let them see. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, become part of our family. And don't forget the little bell icon. It's like a ball that rings with delight. Turn on notifications, never miss a video. Stay connected day and night. So join us on this incredible journey where we create and inspire each day. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's make some magic together, we say.